Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Tired of stories about other people's success? We can help you change your life, determine your time freedom point, and join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. Hello. Today here we have another episode of the Ideal Investor Show, and I want to take this one for a little bit of education because I always think you guys are out there just like me and you're seeing the news and you're watching YouTube videos and other stuff. And I'm sure if you are interested in investing, you're also interested in the stuff that is kind of relevant in the context of investing. And I'm too, I might be a little obsessed with it, but that's also my role and that's my job to make sure that there is somebody like me who is educating you and keeping you up to date. And so this episode, I want to give you a first quick introduction, little high-level introduction, educational episode about what's called Project Enbridge. And just to tell you, if you're a frequent listener to our show, that I frequently talk about BRICS and the, end of this monopoly basically situation where the government in the United States is basically together with other European countries, I would say pretty much telling everybody what to do. And with BRICS that is in the process of changing. And one of the things is obviously many, many countries, more and more coming together because they want to work together, collaborate together, want to do business together, want to exchange goods with each other. They want to trade with each other. And one of the things when you're trading is, what do I have to pay for something that I have that I want to sell or that I want to buy, right? So far, before Enbridge, the situation was in many, many cases that if you are, let's say, the government of Brazil and you have tons and tons and tons and tons of soybeans, and there is the government of China that wants to buy tons and tons and tons and tons of soybeans. The way the transaction in the current monetary and financial and economic system used to work outside of Enbridge and BRICS was that Brazil would basically get dollars that China first had to exchange. They exchanged their currency, the renminbi, into dollars, and then they gave Brazil dollars by sending it through the SWIFT system. And Brazil then had to convert the dollars back to their own currency to pay it out to the farmers. Now, how did this all start? It's two things that started it. Number one, after World War II, it was necessary to establish somehow how can the world trade with each other. And so the SWIFT system is basically just a technology where you can send a code for sending money from one country to another. Then you may have also heard that there was the petrodollar crisis when oil got really expensive, and the United States went to Saudi Arabia and said, okay, we want to make an agreement where you agree that everything that has to do with oil everywhere in the world is being paid in dollars, and in return, we are willing to give you weapons so you can defend yourself. And that was the so-called petrodollar deal. And all the economic and trade systems were basically built on that agreement, on that foundation. When you go and look at the last couple of years, and you've probably heard a lot about the Ukraine war and stuff like that, but one of the things that is related to that is that the US government, together with the European countries, the so-called G7 group, put many, many thousands of sanctions on Russia for that war. And that included that Russia was no longer allowed to basically trade using the SWIFT system. If they wanted to buy anything and pay for it, they were not allowed to send the money through SWIFT. Now, what do you do if you're not allowed to work in the one system that the whole world has been using? They started to develop a new system, a separate system for anybody who was willing to buy their oil, their gas, their grain, or whatever else they have to sell. Well, ultimately, because Russia is part of BRICS, the other member countries said, well, let's look at the situation. Russia got punished because of invading Ukraine. And I would say, they should get punished for that. But by destroying the ability to trade and exchange money, every other country in the world was saying, well, hold on. If we do something that the United States or the G7 doesn't like, they could basically ban us too. And so the BRICS organization started to say, okay, there should be an alternative. If somebody doesn't want to be included in this G7 system with SWIFT and everything is based on dollars, there should be an alternative. And that's what they started, and that's what Project mBridge is actually about. It's basically saying we want to have a system where countries can trade with each other in their currency. So when the Chinese want to buy Brazilian soybeans and the Brazilians want to sell Brazilian soybeans, then the Chinese pay the soybeans in Brazilian pesos. And if the Brazilians want to get and buy something that comes from China, they pay in Chinese yuan, right? So direct internal currency to internal currency. And for each trade, they can have an established interest rate. So that's one thing. No longer having to exchange the money into dollars and back into dollars back and forth for every trade. Now, the other issue that exists in the world that this Project mBridge is solving is the systems were all developed after World War II up until about the middle of the 1970s. And when you look and compare today how the global G7 SWIFT-based transaction system works, and I invite any of you to try this. If you say, okay, I want to support an organization somewhere in a country in Africa, like orphanage or something like that, and you say, I want to wire them $50 as a donation. It can take up to 6 weeks until that transaction is finally settled. Now, they will get the $50 about within 2 weeks. But until all the books are really leveled between your bank and the receiving bank account for the orphanage, takes in the current system up to 6 weeks. Now, that is obviously horrible. And part of the reason is because so many things are still done with paper. And it's called a ledger, where both sides have to basically in their books register that one received $50 and the other one sent $50. Project mBridge is solving that as well, because they're going to, or have already decided and have already tested, that they're going to build the whole thing on something called blockchain. And blockchain means all the countries that are participating, all on their each individual computer have the complete ledger. All transactions all the time are at every computer all the time. Those computers are also called nodes. So when one side, like China, sends money to pay for soybeans in Brazil, all the computers in China and all the computers in Brazil that are involved in that deal all instantaneously have that update. That's blockchain. And so what used to take 10 days to actually have the money in hand and do something with it, and then up to 6 weeks to settle the ledger, now is going to take seconds. And that also means one of the risks that was always involved in the SWIFT system is if it takes a while, at the time that you were making the trade, let's say you got 2 pesos per pound of soybeans, right? But if you converted it and had to do it in dollars and the currency fluctuated between the peso and the dollar or the yuan and the dollar, it may have been only 1.8, or it could have been, if you're lucky, 2.2. So the money that you really received was always depending on the actual exchange rate. And if it takes 6 weeks, the exchange rate can obviously fluctuate. If it takes a few seconds, it's basically negligible. It doesn't fluctuate that much that fast. So it brings big security into these trades, and it makes it much easier because this whole conversion into dollars is going to be out. The other thing is when this independent system is coming into place, then it will be much harder for one country, whether it's the United States or the G7 group or anybody like that, to basically punish anybody within the system. And that is also, if you guys are intrigued now and interested in to say, hey, I've never heard about mBridge, I think this sounds kind of interesting, I want to find out about it. When you go and look into it and who is actually supporting it, you might be surprised to see the International Monetary Fund is involved, the European Union is involved, the Federal Reserve of the United States is involved, and then all the member countries of BRICS are also involved. Why would these other guys that actually want to preserve the SWIFT system be involved? And the answer to that is they know fair well that the system they have established is very much in favor of their own currencies. And so it was just a matter of time when the rest of the world is waking up. And we woke them up by sanctioning Russia, not just with all kinds of economic sanctions, but by sanctioning them in taking away access to the global financial system. At that moment, that was such a big strategic error. At that moment, everybody in the rest of the world knew this could happen to us too. We need to find a way to protect ourselves. And Enbridge is one stop to protect. I personally, if you ask me what would I like to see longer term, I would have liked to see not only that they do Enbridge for the much, much more modern way of paying for stuff, but I would have loved to see if they would have decided that all the trading happens in Bitcoin. Because if everybody uses the same currency, then there is no exchange risk at all anymore, and you can make Bitcoin payments within seconds. And everybody would use the same thing. Now, is that still going to come sometime in the future? Maybe. But at least Enbridge is a step in the right direction, because I think every country should be able to pay in their own currency for stuff that they want to buy. I hope this was educational for you. Have a little bit of an idea what Enbridge is, if you never heard about it. If you actually kind of wonder, why didn't I hear about it? Should I know about it? I would say yes. Because one thing I believe is really, really obvious, especially when you pay close attention to these kind of big picture things that I love to pay attention to, you will see that there is a lot of change going on in the world. And very, very sadly, the media that we have generally access to are basically government propaganda machines. They're only reporting the information and the stuff to you that they want you to know about. So we are, in a way, on our own, and I hope as a community you appreciate that I'm trying to educate you, that I'm out there to try to make sure that relevant information comes to you. But you should also yourself be open to say, okay, I want to have a better understanding how the world works, how my money in that world works, how I can make my money work better for me, and what are all the options. And I wouldn't be surprised that we will have options to participate in Enbridge at some point in the future. And that could be to our advantage if we don't have to have exchange risks and all this other stuff I talked about. So as I said, if you like this episode, please download it, rate it, give comments. And if you want to talk a little bit bigger picture, but also more closely into how I can help you make your money work for you, then please go to idealinvestorshow.com, find the button to book a call, and let's have a conversation. So with that being said, I hope you'll be doing well. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.